Welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm Tammy Dorr, President and CEO of the Downtown Denver Partnership and co-chair of Denver Startup Week. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. DSW has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade. And this week, we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible, our founder track sponsor, Kickstart, growth track sponsor, Friday Health Plans, developer track sponsor, Quizlet, product track sponsor, Palantir, our designer track sponsor, Battery 621, and the Public Works, people track sponsor, Exactly, and spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement to the week. Thank you to B-Side Fund, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pi Insurance, Promontory Mortgage, Path, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors, all listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget, use the hashtag DenStartupWeek to share your experiences and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello, Denver. We are so excited to be here. We're excited to tell you a bit more about the Foundry for Builders program and to be a part of the Denver startup ecosystem. We moved our headquarters to Denver in the last year, and we're excited to call Denver home. Foundry for Builders, essentially we're offering our end-to-end Foundry solution that is deployed to major governments and enterprises worldwide to early and growth stage companies so that they can build their business on Foundry from day one.
Hi everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. My name is Ryan Margolis and I'm the Product Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. As a committee, with Indigenous Peoples Day coming up next week, we felt it was important to start by acknowledging Indigenous people as the original owners and occupants of the land on which we reside, which is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We acknowledge the painful history of genocide, ethnic cleansing, forced removal, stolen land, and forced occupation of their territory, and we honor those who have stewarded this land throughout generations and all other Indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. Now, here we are, Denver Startup Week 2021. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At DSW, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow, regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, sexual orientation, or the combination of those identities. There is something for everyone at DSW. Thanks to all of our community members who submitted their amazing sessions, making this week everything it is. Also, a huge thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us to keep DSW free and accessible for all, especially our Product Track sponsor, Palantir. DSW's Product Track focuses on all things bringing products to life, and certainly doing so with an entrepreneurial mindset. In these sessions, you'll hear from top product professionals about discovery, talking to customers, prioritizing your backlog, justifying new developments, inclusive design best practices, and much, much more. Thank you for being here. Please enjoy this session and the entire DSW week ahead.
All right, hi. Can everyone hear me and see my slides? Cool, thank you. So, hi everyone, thank you so much for coming to this talk today called When Users Break the Mold. Today we're going to be talking about unexpected user behavior and what you can do when you're faced with that situation. And we're specifically going to be looking at a search story. So to set the scene, imagine this. You are a product manager, an engineer, or a designer, and you're trying to build a search product like Amazon, for example. How would you approach this problem? Well, typically, you would build your product according to standard paradigms. So you would lean on patterns like having a big search box with a magnifying glass. So for example, if you're trying to drive COVID mask sales, then you would want your users to type keywords in that box like COVID mask or mask. You would also add some filters. So they could narrow down their search to find reusable masks or like one-time disposable masks. And finally, you would provide some sort options. So they could find the cheapest mask, the highest quality mask, or the mask that's going to arrive the most quickly. And you're confident that this approach is going to work because it's been proven time and time again by tons of successful companies in a variety of industries. So you launch your search engine and you excitedly wait to see your mask sales skyrocket. But then you see what your users are doing. And some are using filters, but even fewer are searching using keywords. And instead, the majority of them just scroll and scroll through pages and pages of results. So TLDR, the standard solution clearly is not working. Your users aren't using your search engine according to tried and tested patterns. They are, in short, breaking the mold. But you still need to ship things that are going to move your OKRs. So this brings us to the how might we statement that's at the crux of our conversation today. How might we serve our users and drive OKRs when they aren't following common behavior patterns? This is the fun product challenge that we faced at Handshake. Let me give you a little bit of context about Handshake so that you can better understand how we approach this. So we serve college students who are searching for internships and jobs, and we currently have 9 million job seekers using our platform. And we started with students, but we are steadily expanding past college. And our goal is to make job search more equitable for all. So if this mission resonates with you, we are hiring across all roles in a variety of locations, including Denver. And I'm one of the people who's been dealing with the fact that our 9 million students aren't using job search the way that searchers normally would. My name is Samhita, my pronouns are she, her, and I work on the student team at Handshake. I joined Handshake after graduating in 2019 as a data engineer and then transitioned into product management. And I'm responsible for the core job search page, the job apply flow, amongst other flows on the student product. So circling back to the problem at hand, we have this job search page on Handshake. And as you can see, we have our search box with the magnifying glass. We have a lot of filter options so students can find the right job type, the right location they want to work in, the right role they're looking for. And we also have some sort options so they can find the job that we think is the most relevant for them or the job where the application due date is coming up the soonest. So we have the search experience with all of the standard pieces. But when we launched it, we saw that 70% of job search sessions did not use keywords. So there were two approaches that we considered when figuring out how to address this unexpected behavior. The first was to lean into the majority behavior, even if it was weird, and try to optimize our search engine to work with it. So in other words, we could shoot for some optimizations and gains by taking the current experience that we had and making it work with the majority behavior. The second was to take a step back, understand why users were behaving the way that they were, and then either drive their behavior to change to what we thought it should be or adapt our product. And we decided to start with the first route of leaning in because of resource constraints. At the time, we had a very small design team. We had no user researchers, and because we did feel like there were some optimizations that we could make to improve our job search. In order to lean into the majority student behavior, we needed to first understand more about how they were using our job search. And so we decided to start a data deep dive. The first question that we asked was whether this behavior was indeed the majority for all segments of students. And on the whole, we found that this was true. So regardless of a student's major, school year, or their job interest, we saw that students were searching for jobs without keywords. Next, we wanted to see if students were using any of the other standard search tools that we were giving them, specifically the many types of filters that we were providing on job search that would ideally narrow down what they were looking for. And we found that only 55% of search sessions used a filter. Even more surprising was that 1/4 of all search sessions were empty state searches, which means that students were using neither a keyword nor a filter. They were just landing on job search and looking at the results that we presented to them by default. So since students were landing on job search and scrolling through the results we provided by default, we wanted to know how many jobs students were looking at on average in a search session. So for context, we show 25 jobs on each page of results. This was a fun one that was really surprising to us. And so I want to see what all of you think might have been the answer here. So drop in the chat how many jobs on average you think students were scrolling through per search session. Got a wide spread already, 110. So what was really, really surprising was that students were going through 73 jobs on average. So this means that they were going through nearly 3 pages of results. So think of what you would do if you went to Google or Amazon. How often do you even go past the first page of results? I know that personally, if I'm searching for something and if I don't see something that's relevant to what I'm looking for in the first 5 results, I'm either gonna like change what I'm searching for or go somewhere else to find it. So this behavior was really, really surprising to us. And finally, given that students were not using the tools that we were giving them, we wanted to see if they were applying for jobs. So in other words, were students somehow achieving the desired outcome of going to a job search page, even if they weren't using it in the right way? And we saw that students were applying, but not at the rate as we would have hoped. And we also saw that if they did not use keywords or filters, they were applying at a lower rate. So in this chart, you can see this big bar at the top is for search sessions where students were using keywords and filters. It drops a little bit for search sessions where students used keywords but not filters. And it more than halves when students were using neither. This is that 25% of search sessions that were empty state searches. And when we saw this data, we believe that students who didn't use keywords or filters simply didn't know what they wanted. And as a result, they were browsing and just weren't ready to apply. And this makes sense because students are very early in their career journey, so maybe they're more in an exploratory mode than someone who's been working for 10 years, for example. So with all of this analysis, we hypothesized that the majority of students were using job search as a recommendations list and not as an actual search engine. And so we decided to optimize for this majority behavior. To do so, we needed to figure out how to improve our default recommendations for when students landed on job search, since they weren't really going to do anything to make the list show them what they wanted to see. So to deliver the best recommendations list that we could, we needed a little bit more information about what students were looking for. And we identified 3 important job preferences. The first is a student's job role preference. So for example, if they want to be a product manager. The next is their location preference. So if they wanted to work, for example, in Denver. And finally, we needed their job type preference, which is whether they are looking for a job, like a full-time job after they graduate, or an internship over the summer or during the school year. And there are 2 ways that we are able to learn this information from our students. The first is shown in this screenshot here. We explicitly collect students' job role preferences in the onboarding flow, and they can always edit it by going to their profile. And we're also able to infer their preferences by either identifying patterns in the jobs that they view, save, and apply to, or by us looking at key profile characteristics like their school year. So if they're graduating at the end of the school year, then they're probably going to look for a job. If they're in their sophomore year this year, then highly unlikely that they're looking for a full-time job. And with these preferences, we were able to improve the recommendations that we showed students in empty state search. So we boosted the ranking of jobs that matched the students' preferences higher in the list. And then we also used collaborative filtering to recommend jobs that students with similar behavior were interacting with. So let's say, for example, I've applied to 3 jobs, A, B, and C, and you've applied to 2 jobs, B and C. Then we could use collaborative filtering to recommend job A to you since our behavior was similar and you're likely also going to be interested in job A. And then we extended this better recommendation logic to search sessions that used filters. So filtered search sessions can be thought of as recommendations list where we remove items that don't match the applied filters. And so we can use interest-based boosting of results and collaborative filtering for the 55% of search sessions that use filters as well. To further improve the foundational recommendations that we were serving in job search, we also wanted to experiment with other tools. This was largely motivated by the fact that at the time, we only had 1 data scientist, and so we really didn't want to reinvent the wheel when we could lean on the work that others had found successful. So we found that Google's recommendations AI, coupled with interest-based boosting, provided the best recommendations that we could give in empty state search. And recommendations AI is actually an e-commerce tool for companies to recommend things that they want their users to buy. But we were able to feed it student behavior, interests, and job posting data to adapt it to our needs. And with all of these different efforts, we boosted the percentage of search sessions that resulted in an application by 14%, which was a really big and exciting win. We did also try some other experiments around keyword search, like turning keywords that could have been filters into filters so that we could use our good recommendations. So for example, if a student searched with a job type like internship, then instead of doing a keyword search to match internship against all our job postings, we would apply the job type filter for internship. And then we also tried to recommend like good keywords that we knew would work well. So these are either specific keywords that we had seen other students having success with based on their major or their school year, et cetera, or keywords that are filters so that we could push students towards the behavior that we were optimizing our search engine for. But with low engagement with keyword search, right, only 30% of search sessions were using keywords, we were not seeing significant gains, and we felt like we had hit a local maximum with our improvements in approach 1. So at this time, we decided that it was time to try the second approach to the problem, which is taking a step back, understanding why users were behaving the way that they were, and then either driving their behavior to change or adapting our product to fit their unique approach. And at this time, we actually had the resources to do this. We had a user researcher and we had an awesome design intern named Queenie who was able to drive our efforts here. So once again, we wanted to ground ourselves in data to understand more about the minority behavior that we thought should have been the majority. And specifically, we wanted to look at what students were doing in those 30% of search sessions when they did use keywords to search for jobs. So once again, let me ask all of you, what do you think students who used keywords were searching for? Was it keywords like A that are specific, like companies, for example, IBM, B, keywords that are slightly vague, but still somewhat intentional, so things like job roles, like software engineer, or C, very vague keywords like internship? Put your answers in the chat. Nice. All right. So We almost got it right here. So it was a little bit of A, like very little bit of a little bit more of B, and then a whole lot of vague keywords like C. So these are the top 10 keywords that students were searching for at the time. And you'll see vague things like analyst, internship, summer, intern, and research. So even when students were using keywords, they weren't really using the ones that we thought would be good. In other words, they weren't using keywords that were specific, that would give them a focused set of results. So let's recap where we're at here. The data pointed to two key issues that we needed to understand. The first was that students weren't using job search in the way that we thought they should be in order to achieve the best outcomes. So in other words, they weren't searching with keywords. The second was that even when students were searching with keywords, they were using bad keywords that were quite vague. And we were, again, somewhat able to justify these patterns by assuming that students didn't know what they wanted. They're early in their career, they might not have a clear idea of what they want to do when they graduate, and maybe they just don't know how to articulate what they're looking for in the industry language of job postings. But in order to make progress and actually serve our users, we needed to challenge this assumption and hear directly from them through research. So we wanted to understand from our users what their overall behavior was when looking for a job. And does this actually include searching? Or are they interested in just browsing and finding something that looks good through that type of process? We also wanted to know what they were using empty state search for and what they were looking for when they used empty state search. When they're doing empty state searches, are they actually interested in finding and applying to a job, or are they kind of in like an educational exploratory? And finally, we wanted to know what students were looking for when they did actually search. Does this imply that they're ready to apply? Does this imply that they actually have an idea of what they're looking for now? And over the course of speaking with our students, we heard some unsurprising themes. The first was that confidence is what drives students' search behaviors. So if a student is more confident in what they're looking for, then they're going to use keywords and filters to articulate what they're looking for. So one student, this quote down here, who had used keywords, told us that they knew exactly what they wanted to do. And so they knew how to search for it. The second unsurprising theme was that students expect Handshake to understand their preferences based on their behavior. And overall, students said that they thought we were doing a good job with this, which was very nice to hear. However, we also learned some surprising things from our conversations. So one of the themes that came out was that loss aversion drives students' behavior. So loss aversion is associated with this thing called prospect theory, which is where the pain of losing is psychologically about twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. So this means that people tend to fear loss twice as much as they're likely to welcome the equivalent gain. And this was very, very clear from all of our student conversations. In other words, students have a lot of FOMO. One student even told us that they didn't put in their major, which is not something that they need to like think about how to articulate, like they know what their major is, but they didn't search with their major because they didn't want to limit the search results they were seeing at all. The other surprising theme was that job choices refine over time. And this makes sense when you think about our students who are just starting their career search journey, but it is unique from many like middle career job searchers or people who have been working for a few years. Students are constantly gaining experiences through classes, clubs, projects, and internships, and what they want to do will change rapidly as they reflect on those experiences. So we need to keep up with that. So clearly, some of our original assumptions about how students wanted to search were not completely valid. And we decided at this point that we needed to evolve our job search to fit their needs. They're a unique user base, and Handshake is in a unique position to serve their needs in a way that other more general job boards can't. And so why not seize that opportunity and make a job search that really works for early talent? So to develop a plan, we wanted to test 4 search concepts that were motivated by our research to identify some quick wins, definite no's, and future iterations. And our design intern Queenie, who also co-led the user research, developed these 4 concepts that I'm going to walk through to do concept testing with our users. So the first was that it was around the student journey. So since job preferences are changing over time, how and when should we check in with users to figure out where they're at with what they want to do? And how might we help students connect the dots between their past experiences and discover future possibilities based on what they've done? So this first concept over here shows what we might present to students who told us that they just had a product design internship at Handshake, for example. So we might point them to look at a junior product designer job at Headspace or a product researcher job at Snap. It also shows down here that we could indicate to students the new skills that they're gaining so that they can discover positions based on exciting new skills that they've learned. And then we also wanted to see how we could make it easier for students to understand qualifications and responsibilities. So that's the second concept over here. This job posting has at the top the expected day-to-day role for the job that the student is looking at. And it also highlights qualifications. Something that's really cool, which we actually already have in our product, is a direct line for students to reach out to the job poster to learn more about the job. So ideally, this would really help students have a clear idea of expectations around requirements and qualifications to give them the confidence that they would need to apply to the job. Next, we tested this concept of feeds and saved searches. So we do have saved searches on Handshake, but the feature isn't super prominent on our job search and it's not super utilized as a result. And we wanted to understand how students might use and build feeds and what they would want them for. So we wanted to see over here if we presented this ability for a student to create a feed to stay up to date on new jobs, how they would feel about it, and what types of feeds they would even build. And then we also wanted to see how important timeliness and freshness is in the job search process. So that's the second screenshot here. This shows how in job search, how we might present to users how fresh the job is by saying, this was just posted 4 hours ago, and also provide a little bit of urgency by saying that this job posting is going to be expiring in 3 days. Like, you need to apply in the next 3 days if this is interesting to you. Third, we wanted to compare preferences and requirements. So we know that our early talent users are unique in that they are very flexible and they're open to lots of different possibilities. And so we wanted to see how they might articulate what is a must-have versus a nice-to-have, as this concept shows. So here, if the user selected industry in their must-haves, they would be telling us that they know exactly the industry that they want to work in, but they don't really care about the role that they're working in. They don't care about where they work, like the location. All they know is this is the industry that is calling them. And finally, we wanted to dig into exploration and keywords. So we made this concept to see if keywords or tags could serve as an education opportunity for students to learn about their interests as they are browsing. So here, if a user knew that they were interested in the graphic designer role, then we could tell them that these tags are associated, like design, communications, and that could help them figure out how to search for jobs in graphic design. On the flip side, if students have noticed in their job search that when they use or see keywords like design, they get good results, we could show them roles that are within that realm of design, roles that are tagged with the keyword design. So after Queenie spoke with our students, she found that job feeds really resonated with them. And these feeds would help them curate what they wanted to see and organize opportunities without removing possibilities. So in other words, this would help them feel way less FOMO. Feeds also won with students because while they know their must-haves and their nice-to-haves, they don't always know how they want those preferences and requirements to affect what they're seeing in search results. And so creating feeds is a way for them to play around with filtering all these preferences without feeling like they're removing options or losing out on possibilities. So in this example, the students created 2 feeds here, NYC design and all design. So what a student might see here is that they have a hard requirement for design. They know that they want to be a designer, but they have a soft preference for where they work. And so they can still organize it by seeing, like, in New York, what are the design opportunities that exist? But in order to make sure that they're not missing out on like their dream design job that could be in any location, since they don't really care what location they work in, they can also have this all design feed to help them organize what they're looking at. We also saw that keywords that were associated with job roles were a great way to educate students on how to articulate what they were looking for. So one junior told us that it was a lot easier than trying to come up with keywords themselves. And the job roles were showing them words that they were interested in searching with without them having to guess how to search. And we've seen in the past that job roles are a great way for students to learn about opportunities and like to educate students on how to go about the job search process. So this is a natural extension of some of the work that we've already done elsewhere on the product. So here, if the student knows that they're interested in the marketing coordinator role, and they can look at jobs that could be interesting to them, then they know that they can use the keyword communications to either find more roles that are similar to marketing coordinator or find jobs that they're interested in applying to. So our next step is to experiment with feeds. And we're going to be leaning into and expanding on our current Save Search feature by introducing feeds to work with our student behavior. So we are deciding to adapt our product to serve our unique user base and the way that they approach job search. So I'll be back next year, hopefully, to share what we learned from building these feeds. To wrap up, I want to leave all of you with 3 things that you can do when you are faced with unconventional user behavior. The first is to always challenge your foundational assumptions. So atypical behavior does not necessarily equal bad behavior. And we can and should always lean on design models, common practices, and industry norms, but we should also lean into data and experiment to figure out what our users want. If we had not challenged our original assumptions from looking at behavior and leaning on industry norms, then we would have thought that our users simply don't know what they want. We might have gone down a path of like trying to educate them over and over again instead of realizing that they have this fear of missing out on opportunities. And that's something that we can alleviate in the way that we design the job search experience for this unique user base. The second is to always dig into the nuances of the behavior that you're seeing with data and user research. And as I'm sure you all know, it's always important to do a qualitative and quantitative analysis when trying to understand stuff like this. But what I thought was particularly useful is the few different lenses that we were using. So first, we looked at different segments of users, whether it was major, school year, to figure out if the behavior was actually as widespread as we thought it was. And it was. We also saw how behavior was changing over time, which was another helpful way to realize that it's not like across the student journey, as students were getting older and older, they were changing their search behaviors. And then finally, we grouped data based on whether the desired outcome of applying to a job was achieved, which helped us realize that there was a real need here to change something. And these lenses also helped us better understand what was happening to inform what we actually went to users to talk to them about, making our user research more efficient. And finally, it's always important to evaluate the pros and cons of leaning into the majority behavior versus taking a step back. And in order to evaluate the pros and cons, the first thing we looked at was the impact of the atypical behavior. And the impact here was that students weren't applying to jobs at a rate that we wanted them to. We also looked at which approach we had the resources to go down. And at the beginning of this project, we didn't have the resources to do a thorough user research process. And then finally, we looked at whether or not there was the potential to make progress in either approach. And we realized that by taking the first approach of leaning in, there were still some wins that we could make. Ideally, we could have like parallel pathed the 2 approaches, but we did see that there were gains to be made, which made either route a good place to start. So that's all I have. Thank you very much for listening. And I'm happy to take any questions now about anything in the presentation or any of the exciting roles that we're currently hiring for. if there are no questions, I'm also going to drop my email address if you want to connect separately about any of the content or any of the roles that we're hiring for. So Prem asked a good question. Did you see more intentional search behavior from older users? And the answer is not as much as we thought. So we did see seniors applying at higher rates, but we didn't see them necessarily using more keywords or search filters. And this was true across all different majors that we were looking at. I think that's interesting because like, even though, you know, as a senior, you maybe had like one internship, you've taken like way more classes, there's still this very exploratory mindset, which is really cool and something that we can support. This is a great question. So since employers are always looking to attract the best talent, do you see opportunities to help them improve their job posting? So yeah, we have an awesome account management and customer success team on our employer side of the business, and they're constantly helping them think through best practices for hiring. So this includes the way that they make their job postings, making sure that they're using inclusive language, making expectations really clear, using the right keywords that will attract the right talent. And we also help them think through hiring criteria. So for example, we've really encouraged our employers to move away from GPA requirements and also to think about skills instead of just majors, because we know that major does not necessarily equal a student's career. Another question from Katie. For the recommendation with no filter selected, did users need to be logged in? What information did you base recommendations on if a new user was not logged in? Yeah, so for users to use Handshake right now, they need to be logged in. So we have two types of students on Handshake, those that are affiliated with a partner university and those that make an account because their university is not affiliated with us yet. And so the information that we get from onboarding is really critical for the recommendations that we provide on home and in job search. So we collect those three preferences that I mentioned are super important. So job role, location, job type. We also do have their major that we can fall back on if we don't have any of their preferences. And then finally, we use similar behavior. If this isn't their first time logging in, they've had some behavior before, we can use their past behavior and other students' similar behavior to provide recommendations. And if we ever, whenever we do move to a state where users can access information when they're not logged in, I think it's going to be a really interesting problem to figure out how we would be able to provide good recommendations when they first come to our platform. All right, well, if there are no other questions, we can all get some time back. Thank you very much for listening and for the great questions, and feel free to reach out if anything else comes up. Thank you.